criticizing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's policy positions hasn't worked out too well for Republicans thus far because they're quickly learning that the things she's talking about are actually overwhelmingly popular among the American electorate. So by trying to fearmonger about her policies, they're probably starting to realize that they were actually inadvertently promoting her and making her more popular overall. So what are they doing now to smear her since they're learning that it actually doesn't behoove them to focus on the policy substance? Well, they're attacking her for one of her greatest strengths. They're trying to tell us that she's actually dumb and ditzy. She's stupid. That's literally their new coordinated effort to delegitimize Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And as a result, we get headlines like this from CBS News. Quote, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez becomes the Sarah Palin of the left. And yes, this is a real article. Now, the implication here is that she's dumb and ditzy, just like Sarah Palin. She can't speak on any specifics with regard to policy. And overall, she's naive, she's in over her head. And conservative commentator Michael Graham bases this argument off of the many, quote, gaffes that she's made since she won her primary. But what's ironic is that this author, in writing this article, he makes numerous factual mistakes himself. He makes gaffes, if you will, himself. So it's clear that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, but at the same time that he's clearly ignorant, he's trying to explain to us just how dumb Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is. So regardless, we'll hear him out and see what he has to say. So he argues if you're one of the many American progressives cheering on the performance of your new political rock star, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, look around. Many of the people cheering with you are Republicans. Ocasio-Cortez's 14-point victory over 10-term incumbent Democrat Joe Crowley was certainly impressive. Her performance since then, not so much. The GOP have branded her the gaffe machine. Democrats on Capitol Hill are urging her to do things differently, and her stumbling media appearances have sparked references to the P word, Palin. Yes, it's that bad. First and foremost, if Republicans are in fact cheering her on with us, then keep doing that, because you're unwittingly ushering in the demise of your side, because regardless of how stupid you think she is, her policy positions are overwhelmingly popular. We've done this on the show where we've gone issue by issue, and we've looked at the policies on her platform, and we've showed how they have majority support among the American electorate. Now, that's with the exception of abolish ICE, but that's the only exception. Everything else she's talking about, like Medicare for all, a federal jobs guarantee, these are things that actually resonates with the American people because they see how these policies would actually have a positive impact on their lives. Now, second of all, the GOP, or really anyone from the right, doesn't get to label anyone on the left as a gaffe machine when Donald Trump is the standard bearer of the Republican Party currently, and when their last standard bearer was George W. Bush. So you had the political equivalents of Dumb and Dumber lead the Republican Party, and now you guys want to call out who's stupid on the left? You guys don't get to do that. Sorry, you lost the authority to judge who's stupid on the left when your side keeps electing dumb fucking presidents. So you don't get to do that anymore. And third, the author links to an article where Democrats on Capitol Hill allegedly told Ocasio-Cortez to, quote, do things differently as a result of numerous gaffes. But when you actually follow the link, it goes to an article from Mike Lillis of The Hill. And in this article, it's about corporate Democrats criticizing Ocasio-Cortez specifically because she endorsed their progressive primary challengers over them. But this author was hoping that you wouldn't actually follow the link and read the article because it in no way proved the point he was trying to make. The goal here was to get you to think that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is so stupid that even Democrats on Capitol Hill are saying that she's stupid. But in actuality, that article is about them being butthurt that she's criticizing not only them, but endorsing their progressive primary challengers. So the article doesn't prove what you think it proves, but certainly I think that he is aware of this. He just was hoping that you would be lazy and not click on the link. But I actually clicked on the link. It doesn't prove what you want it to prove. But nonetheless, I do want to get to the specific gaffes because he cites 6 in particular. And out of all of these gaffes, there's only one that's actually a real gaffe. So he states, in the short 6 weeks since her upset primary win, Ocasio-Cortez claimed unemployment is low because everyone has 2 jobs. So I'll grant him this one. That's a gaffe because clearly she misspoke. I think overall what she was talking about is how, everyone, they might have jobs, but they're lower paying jobs. So the unemployment rate, generally speaking, that's not a good gauge of just how well the working class in America is doing. But she didn't make that point. That's not what she said. So sure, that's a gaffe, but everything else, definitely not a gaffe. And in fact, in chalking some of these, quote, gaffes up to gaffes, it really shows how ignorant the author is himself. So he states that one of her gaffes was that she referred to Israel's, quote, occupation of Palestine and struggled to explain what that meant. This one is not a gaffe. In fact, referring to Israel's occupation of Palestine as such, that's not even up for debate. In fact, you don't have to take my word for it. This is what the UN said. In its resolution 2334, the Security Council reaffirmed that the establishment by Israel of settlements in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem, had no legal validity and constituted a flagrant violation under international law and a major obstacle to the achievement of the two-state solution and a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace. So her not being able to articulate that doesn't qualify as a gaffe if she actually admits that she's not an expert on this particular subject. It would have been a gaffe if she tried to answer the question while not actually knowing what she was saying and ended up saying something that was incorrect, but she said that she wasn't an expert, and by referring to Israel's, quote, occupation of Palestine, that's not a gaffe, that's a fact. Now let's go on to another gaffe. He states that she claimed the upper middle class doesn't exist anymore. So even though this isn't technically true, I wouldn't characterize this as a gaffe because she was clearly speaking to the fact that the middle class in America has in fact been disappearing over the last 2 decades. Also, he states that she wrongly accused her defeated Democratic opponent of plotting a third-party challenge against her. Again, this is not a gaffe, it's a fact. Joe Crowley is not only remaining on the ballot under the banner of the Working Families Party after they asked him to take the necessary steps to remove himself, but he also refuses to endorse someone as a successor to him. So again, these are not gaffes, but we have 2 more here. Quote, she also compared the costs of the GOP tax cuts, less than $2 trillion over the next 10 years, to the costs of her Medicare for All approach, estimated at around $32 trillion over a decade. This is also not a gaffe, and in fact, it shows how uninformed the author is as he ironically compares Ocasio-Cortez to Sarah Palin. While Medicare for All does technically cost $32 trillion according to a Koch-funded study, that's actually less than the cost of our current healthcare system. So her Medicare for All plan saves money overall. So because you didn't know that and because you're uninformed, that doesn't mean that her saying something you didn't know is a gaffe. It's a gaffe on you to call that a gaffe. Now also, he states, to make matters worse, she added this during a CNN interview. Americans have the sticker shock of healthcare as it is, and what we're also not talking about is why aren't we incorporating the cost of all the funeral expenses of those who died because they can't afford access to healthcare. That is part of the cost of our system. Yes, what about all the savings we'll have under Medicare for All once people stop dying? Again, this is not a gaffe. In fact, this is actually a really good point that she brought up because when we're talking about the sticker shock of healthcare, people do die if they have a medical emergency and can't afford healthcare. And the cost of funeral expenses is something that directly results from our predatory for-profit system. And it's not like she was implying that people would suddenly become invincible and stop dying the moment we move to a Medicare for All system, but obviously the point she was trying to make is that people will no longer die unnecessarily if they have a medical emergency but don't have healthcare. But of course he's not going to interpret anything that she says charitably because the whole goal of this article was to smear and delegitimize her. So let's recap. Out of a total of 6 gaffes that he cites, only one of them is technically a gaffe, 2 if you want to be super kind, about her middle class comment. But she was still making a broader overall point, that's true. So the irony here is that as this author tries to frame her as this political idiot who's comparable to Sarah Palin and ditzy and dumb, this idiot is only chalking these things up to gaffes because he's uninformed himself. But yet he has the nerve to call her stupid? Get the fuck out of here. I mean, again, this is why Republicans are such clowns. They have someone like Donald Trump as the leader of their party, but yet they're going to go out of their way to criticize people on the left for being dumb. I mean, the hypocrisy is overwhelming, but nonetheless, he kind of goes on to say this about her gaffes overall and the impact it's having on her credibility. Ocasio-Cortez's gaffes have become so frequent and harmful that a cottage industry has risen up on the right to trumpet them. She's become a staple of talk radio, and clips of her less than flattering moments frequent Fox News. Websites like the Washington Free Beacon and the Daily Caller delight in highlighting the latest misstep from the new poster person for American progressivism. And you say that they're all attacking her because she's making gaffes and because she's dumb. But what's clear to people with brains is that they're attacking her not because there's merit to their claims, but because this is a strategy for them. Since they can't criticize her policies, since her ideas are popular, and since fear-mongering about socialism doesn't really work as well as it did before, and since she's an incredibly well-spoken, clearly intelligent individual, they're targeting her intelligence because it's actually one of her biggest strengths. If they all dogpile on her at once in this coordinated effort to convince ordinary Americans that this bright young woman is as dumb as Sarah Palin, then they're hoping it will pay off. This is a strategy for them. There's no merit to their claims. It might have an influence. It might convince some people, but do you want to know the electorate or the portion of the electorate in America who's probably less concerned with a politician's intelligence? Republicans. Because again, who's your president right now? Terrific. Bigley. You have a fucking idiot, a village idiot, as your standard bearer, and the last president was George W. Bush. So, I don't think intelligence is something that Republican Party voters are too concerned about, and really, if the target audience is them, then I don't think this is going to be very effective. And furthermore, regardless of how stupid you think Ocasio-Cortez is, the fact remains that her policy ideas, well, they're just popular. And that's why they are doing everything in their power to attack her in any way that they think is going to be effective and resonate with ordinary Americans. And when this strategy ultimately fails, when they can't convince people that this clearly intelligent woman is stupid, what are they going to do? They're going to pivot to a different strategy, because this is what right-wingers do. But this is them really making it clear that they're scared shitless of her. They don't know what to do with her because they can't criticize the policies because she's too popular there. They try to criticize her intelligence because that's one of her greatest strengths, and when she speaks with clarity most of the time. And so they try to go for that, but they have nothing, and I love it. I love watching them become unhinged at the thought of a young progressive putting them all in their places. It's great. But I do want to get to how he closes this article, because he actually argues that her influence is already starting to wane, and he does this by propping up Hillary Clinton. Not even kidding. This is what he says. Last month, she and her progressive mentor, Bernie Sanders, campaigned hard for progressives Cori Bush and Brent Welder in the Kansas Democratic primary. Both lost. In a Politico article titled "Down Goes Socialism," Bill Scher notes that it was Hillary Clinton and not Ocasio-Cortez whose endorsement carried the most weight in Michigan last week. Clinton's late robocall in support of Haley Stevens helped take Stevens from second place in the polls to an election night victory in the suburban 11th district, a top Democratic target, while Feroz Saad, backed by Ocasio-Cortez, placed fourth. In fact, Democratic establishment candidates have been on a roll since the Ocasio-Cortez upset. Could it be that her high-profile missteps are convincing candidates to remain more moderate? That the net result of Ocasio-Cortez's candidacy is fewer progressive candidates in November? No, and you're lying. You're being disingenuous here. You're not talking about the candidates she endorsed that actually won. Sarah Smith, James Thompson, Rashida Tlaib. And when it comes to the odds of who's going to win, well, if you're trying to argue that Hillary Clinton has more influence in politics than Ocasio-Cortez, when it comes to congressional races, the candidate with the most money almost always wins. And Ocasio-Cortez has remained principled, and she's exclusively endorsed candidates that don't take corporate PAC money, whereas Hillary Clinton has only endorsed corporate-backed candidates. So, generally speaking, these types of attacks, these ad hominem attacks, which are particularly disgusting, I'm not even mad here. I think that this is really amusing because it's clear that the right, they're grasping for straws. They don't know how to deal with someone this young, this intelligent, this popular. So they try to go after one of her greatest strengths, because that would be a way to kind of bring her down a few notches, really to kind of call into question her intelligence by highlighting all of these gaffes. But in actuality, she's made a couple of gaffes. I mean, come on.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.